Okay with you, Jay, I'd like to start by asking you some questions about some of the tracks on this album, if I may. Now, first of all, I'm interested in the song "Bright Light." Is this a song? Would you describe this as a song about salvation? And does faith inform your writing at all?
Oh, yes. I think faith, you got to break faith down, like I wouldn't think of faith in terms of like a religious faith. I
Okay.
think that I would look at it more in terms of faith that you're going to get through something. Faith that you're going to be able to, that you're going to have the wherewithal to persevere when things get difficult. And yes, certainly, I think that song in particular has a great deal to do with that very faith.
Mhm.
Bright Light is about that, it's the it's the salvation when you see the salvation coming. When I say salvation, it's just throughout your life at various times you're going to be down in the trench.
Uh-huh.
You know, your existence is or my existence is certainly comprised of peaks and valleys. You know, and when you're on the peak, you just try to take stock and relish in the moment. And then when you're down in the valley, you kind of got to do the same thing. You got to realize that you're in a place of learning, and even though if it's a place of turmoil, you need to embrace it in the same way. But Bright Light is definitely about being in the valley and knowing that you're going to be. It's kind of like your own rescue,
Mhm.
when you can see that you've been going about something. Um, well, you can see that you've been going about something in a way that isn't working,
Yeah.
or perhaps that you've been lost to a certain degree. And Bright Light is about realizing that and having your better self pull you out of that valley.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some great tracks, some really interesting tracks on here. I mean, I love the start of Dark Side. I'm just curious. It reminds me. It makes me think of Johnny Cash. Is he an influence at all?
I mean, God, yeah. If you write music at all, Johnny Cash was an influence, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what would sound like Johnny Cash. I mean, I'm singing in a lower timbre for my voice, that's for
It has
sure.
kind of an acoustic, a sort of nice acoustic sort of start to it. I think that's for some reason made me think of that.
Yeah, I could see that. That's the guitar that I'm playing on that is an 8 string baritone acoustic guitar. It's a little bit of an odd instrument, but I think that instrument in particular informed a lot of my writing
Yeah.
for both DarkFighter and the subsequent album that will be out in October, Lightbringer.
Hmm.
That baritone acoustic informed a lot of
Yeah.
my voice.
Yeah. Bird in the Hand. What's the story behind that one?
Oh, that's a broad question. Let's see. You know, that's like that's kind of like going like, okay, bird in the hand, go. But let me think. There's just so much behind each song.
Hmm.
I think that bird in the hand, that's one of those songs that there's really two different styles of writing for me. There is if I'm given some music, or if we're in the studio and we get a jam going. So then we write a chorus, and but that's very much live on the floor writing.
Hmm.
And then I take it home and I sit with it. And sometimes I have to sit with the song for quite a while to decipher what the song is what the song is telling me it needs to be.
Hmm.
So there's that, trying to listen to the song's identity and not fight against it, but to work with it. But then there's also what you feel you need to say. There's
Yeah.
also what I need to say as a person and what message I want to sing about as an artist, and what I will be comfortable reciting every night on stage. You know, I try to be, for the most part, I try to keep that in mind when I'm writing songs, because I've learned the hard way. Well, if you write this, you might have to sing it every night. So make it something that's important to you, because if it's not, you know, it won't age well.
Yeah.
But with Bird in the Hand, that was a track that it began as just a blues stomp. And I remember in particular with that one feeling, oh man, this is just like a stock bluesy, sort of a glam rock thing. Like, I'm over this. I don't want to write to this. And I was feeling uninspired. And we had written it all together and we wrote the chorus together and everything, but just feeling, I sat with it and I felt uninspired for quite a while with it. And I knew it's not that the music was bad or anything like that, but listening to it going like, okay, well, this is basically the Hunter from Albert King, like that riff. Dun, 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 and so what I ended up doing was I chose to write a melody for it that had nothing to do with blues. It's a long form melody that meanders and never repeats for the entire verse. There's
Yeah.
no part of the melody that repeats to to the way typically a verse melody will go A B A B C, or that it has a pattern like that. But with this song, my answer to it being so bluesy was to write a long form melody that had nothing to do with the blues.
Right.
And as a result, like I love playing that song, and it's a melody and lyrics that are I really have a great time singing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I'm interested. Yeah, I presume guillotine is a kind of a metaphor. I'm just, what does it mean in the context of this song?
Oh, that's when we wrote this album, and while we were working on this
Yeah.
record, like we did this during the pandemic, during the lockdown, and you know I don't know which part of the UK you're in, but like for us over here in the United States, you know, I know that a lot of our dirty laundry was aired
Hmm.
worldwide.
Yeah.
That we were going through here with, we had the politicalization of um, we had the politicalization of a virus itself,
Yeah.
and then we had the politicalization of even wearing a mask if you're in public, and
Yeah.
then we had the politicalization of you know of a vaccine,
Hmm.
and that was either right or left, and then you have in the middle of all of this and the isolation and the lockdown and people can't work. I mean, we couldn't work, so we chose to create
Yeah.
because that was all we could do. But in the middle of all of this, people are dying and people are trying not to get sick. People are losing mothers and fathers and loved ones, and they can't even say goodbye because they can't get into the hospital. Just terrible,
Yeah.
terrible things.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
middle of all of this, you have people just wanting to fight with each other because you have these issues, and then you have an election year.
Hmm.
So it just gets even more divisive. And then you have the murder of George Floyd
Yeah. Yeah.
in Minneapolis. And then you have the Black Lives Matter movement that comes up like long overdue. This is a very, very important um, cultural movement. But then you have peaceful protests, but then you have anarchy and you have Antifa popping up, and you have city blocks being shut down, and then you have people storming the Capitol, and then you have all of this.
Hmm.
Well, America just kind of lost its mind, and I think that amidst all of that, it was I certainly, I think that it became about just trying to keep my shit together.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like I got a family and to take care of, and I had to move my family back to California from Tennessee amidst all of this turmoil, and we're making this record. But I think that Guillotine, you know, that chorus, am I closer to heaven or closer to hell?
Hmm.
And the deeper I go, it's harder to tell. That's very much like a nursery rhyme, right?
Hmm.
But it's being about tumbling so hard and being disoriented. And it's that lethargy, that the lethargic part of a mission where you know you have to keep going, but you start questioning the mission statement itself,
Hmm.
you
Okay.
know, because everything that is going on around you and all of the turmoil is so disorienting, you know. That's really what that track's about.
So it's like a surveying of the political landscape in America at the time.
Well, yes, you see, it's not that I'm writing with Guillotine, it's not that I'm writing about that political turmoil or that cultural mitosis. It's not that I'm writing about these divisive things dividing families, you
Hmm.
know, across the dinner table, getting, you know, friends losing touch with each other, not wanting to talk with each other, you know, over all of these topics that keep coming up. Because every topic that would come up was, well, how do you feel about this? Where do you stand on this issue? Like, oh, I mean, I don't know. I, I'm just going to go get a beer. What are you talking about? I thought we were just going to talk and have a
Yeah.
pint. But these issues come up and, you know, culturally very, very sensitive. It's not that I was writing about any one of these topics
Hmm.
specifically on 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 any of the album. It's that going through this turmoil, writing about these things was my osmosis, you know. It's like these songs and the subject matter was part of that osmosis of me um, wanting to write about things that were significant to me.
Okay. Okay. We can go back a little bit. I'm just interested to know what prompted you to sign for Earache Records, as this is a label, as far as I know, represented mainly sort of darker and much heavier bands. So how did that come about?
Well, Digby over at Earache, he pursued us,
Oh, okay.
and we didn't know what to think of that at that time. To my knowledge, Earache had yet to ever sign a rock band or anything like us.
Hmm.
Now you can see like Earache has brought on a lot of different types of music onto their roster
Hmm.
to great effect. I think that Earache Records has provided a really great channel for rock bands.
Yeah.
Well, at that time, all we knew was that it was a metal and death metal label, and we had no idea like why. What does that have to do with us? That doesn't have anything to do with the music that we're creating. And I think it was either Digby Pearson or it might have been Dan Tobin who was at the label over there for a long time. And
Mm.
but it was expressed to us like, look, you guys are making at that time. Rival Sons is making the type of rock music that directly predates metal.
Hmm.
So here's where you are on that family tree. And then it made more sense. But it was an odd pairing because we were thrust into the metal world, you know, the metal vernacular, the festivals, everything. Our
Yeah.
first, our first UK and European tour was we were opening up for Priest,
Yeah.
and a huge honor. Who doesn't like Judas Priest? Even though everybody likes Judas Priest at least a little bit, you know. But
Mhm.
it was them and I don't know, was it Queensryche?
Yeah.
So we knew that Earache had been knocking on our door,
Hmm.
and we weren't sure what to make of it. But it didn't take too long. We discussed contractual matters, and making sure that both parties were going to be happy. We ended up striking up a relationship that was going to be beneficial to both of us. And I think that we were on Earache Records for quite a while, and I think they did a really great job in some respects, and I think that they continue to do a great job
Hmm.
for rock bands. And I think it's great what they've done. For us, it certainly felt like we were the ones, because we were the only band that wasn't metal. We were the only rock band. So we were kind of clearing the foxhole and slicing through the
Yeah.
trees in the jungle to try to forge a path. And but I'm really happy with what they've been able to provide, to more rock bands out there.
Yeah, I remember seeing you guys play the Rambling Man Festival over here in the UK, and you were on with a band called Temperance Movement. Do you remember
Oh
those
yeah,
guys?
of course, of course I do. Yeah, Temperance Movement was
They
a
were a
great
great band.
band.
They were,
Yeah,
but
and I think that I was bummed to hear of the Temperance Movement's demise. You know,
and they were doing so well.
Phil,
You know, they'd support the
yeah, they were
Stones and
doing they
everything.
were doing so well, and I mean, look, bands don't necessarily last. Bands don't last forever, and Phil is just such. He's got such a great voice, and he's got such a great energy as a frontman.
That's fantastic. Yeah, but they were. That was the day. I think was it Greg Allman? Wasn't he the headlining act that day?
Hmm. I think so, and yeah, that's right. He was the headliner there, and yeah, we had a really good time. It was always, we were friends with the Temperance Movement, so whenever we, got to play together, get to hang out a little bit,
Yeah.
it was always a really good vibe. And that day was, yeah, that was fun. My buddy Vic Reeves came out, and we got to hang out backstage for a long time and just getting to catch up. That's
Yeah.
one of the best parts about touring, and when you get to play a festival, you get to see your friends,
Yeah.
because everybody's always traveling so much that
Yeah.
getting to see each other and catch each other's sets during a festival it's a really, really great time.
Yeah. I'm interested. What does David Cobb bring to the Rival Sun sound?
Well, I think as a producer, Dave's part of the family.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gone on to, Cobb's gone on to be wildly successful. He's
Mhm.
very talented. He's phenomenal at what he does. And I think with us, we've made 9 records with Dave now. If you include DarkFighter and Lightbringer, like we've made more records with Dave than anyone has.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, we've made more records with Dave than anyone has. And we've certainly developed a creative shorthand with our communication. And he knows who we are. He's well versed in it, and in all of our material. And he knows who we are personally, creatively. And I've personally worked with Dave on a lot of different projects, and it's really been fantastic as the band has grown in our various directions over the years,
Uh-huh.
because we like to change course with each record. you know if you go back to like the first two, Before the Fire to the
Yeah.
EP, very different from each other. And then if you jump to Pressure in Time, very different from its previous record. And then you go to Head Down, extremely different from
Yeah.
Pressure in Time. And then you go to Great Western Valkyrie, again, completely different. And so we're always trying to grow and push our own parameters, and push out the boundaries of what we've done before. I'm not saying we're a band that's reinventing the wheel by any stretch. I don't mean it that way. I just mean increasing our vocabulary, in an artistic way. I think that as we've grown with each record, Dave, he makes so many records per year, and he works with so many great historic artists
Mhm.
as well as up and coming artists. that while we're over here and we're trying to grow and expand in our way, Cobb is over here in his career and he's doing the same thing. And he's trying to push his boundaries and um, reapproach his craft of production. So every time we come together, we both come back with a little bit of a different identity when we make a record, and then we just graft together for that bit.
Yeah.
And then, we're able to get something different every time. So he will help with, we'll have a song, and sometimes he'll pick up an acoustic guitar and like, oh, well, maybe what about this for a pre-chorus or something like that, or like you need some sort of a transition here. He's really hands-on. He's really hands-on that way.
Is he like your George Martin?
What?
Is he like your George Martin?
I think so. Maybe not that intensive, because that gets back to another thing that I really appreciate about Cobb's production style. One thing that hasn't changed. I think it's a very intelligent approach on Dave's part, that I think he works to be a transparent producer. And I guess what I mean is that you don't necessarily hear a Dave Cobb record and go like, oh, that's a Dave Cobb record. Because what he is so good at is it appears that he just wants to magnify whichever artist he's working with, and just to try to get a good, honest representation of that artist, instead of glorifying himself or developing a sound. And don't get me wrong, there are many producers out there that certainly have a sound, and when you hear it, you go like, oh, that's definitely a Mark Ronson album, or that's definitely a Rick Rubin album. And with hip hop, don't even get me started. Producers are very much like, here's what my song sounds like, here's my production style. I feel like his approach is so organic, and he's there to help the artist and to serve the song. And I think that's just a great approach. It's part of what makes me love him.
Yeah. There's one of your earlier songs. I love the song "Wild Animal." Does that still make it into the set list?
No, not really. I mean, like I said, previous to DarkFighter and Lightbringer, we're talking about 7 records.
Yeah.
The idea of putting together a set list is a son of a bitch.
How does that work?
It is. Well, we basically sit around and we'll go, well, okay, here are the most, when it comes to like the greatest hits section or the greatest hits aspect of your set list, we try to throw in songs, and singles, because we know that people have expectations. That's on one hand.
Yeah.
So people have expectations, or like, that could be many people's favorite song. Wild Animal, that was a single for us.
Yeah.
But on one hand, you have the idea of possibly serving any expectations to the audience. It's A. And those are the songs that got us where we are, those singles. But B, you've got the other part, that I just don't care. I just don't care what you want. I don't care. I don't care what you want, and I don't care how you feel about it, because for the band, it's our identity. And every night when we hit the stage, it's us playing for us. And any real fan of the band, I would like to think they just want us to be ourselves. That's all. It's like the idea of being beholden to an audience that feels sickening to me. And so I think that we balance back and forth about like, well, we don't owe anybody anything, but at the same time, okay, let's throw this song in. But we always try to throw in some deep cuts onto any set list.
See, I remember I saw you a few times over the years. I mean, at the time you were always opening your set with Electric Man. which was a great set opener. I thought it was a great album as well. I really enjoyed that album. Um, I was wondering what it was like working with Storm Thorgerson. I mean, because he did a couple of album covers for you.
At Storm, we only worked with Storm for one album cover, and
Okay.
that was the Pressure and Time record.
Yeah.
It's a really funny story because I mean it's Storm Thorgerson, and we were one of the last record cover, one of the last albums that he did the cover for. So he was, first of all, he was just great to work with, you
Yeah.
know, kind of everything that you would think a moody old British intellectual, and but and I recall Storm just being very protective of us. He was talking to Scott and I, was talking about like, you just tell everyone to fuck off,
Hmm.
and let's just do this together, and don't let them get at your soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't let don't let the brass push you around ever. And so that was very inspirational. He had some different ideas. We sent him the music, and he had some different ideas that he sent over to us, and we loved working with him. Um, and in the end, it's probably our worst album cover out of any of them. But we we did that with Storm. It's like it's a bald man walking down some stairs, and I think we're just looking at it, going like, "Hey, man, we'll work with Storm Thorgerson. Let's do this. Let's do this." But as soon as the album came out, and uh, we saw the records lined up at HMV, and it's just a bunch of bald old men all just going like, "Yes, I think maybe we should have had a little bit more scrutiny with Storm on this." But he was delightful. Storm was fantastic, and may he rest in peace.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen you over a few years as a support band. I saw you supporting Lenny Kravitz. I've seen you supporting Aerosmith. I just wonder if you have any interesting anecdotes from your time as a support band. Nothing that's going to get you sued, of course, but something that might be quite interesting.
Well,
How
I
was
can
Aerosmith?
I can speak to what it means to be a support band, and I think that that's probably the most interesting
Yeah,
response. We've opened for everyone, and I mean we've played with everybody.
yeah.
Um, we've played with everybody,
Sabbath.
and
Mm.
so yeah, Sabbath. I mean, God, AC/DC.
Hmm.
We've even opened for Kiss. You
Yeah,
know, but it's like I think that there's two ways to look at it. It feels good to play to your own audience. It feels good to have a big packed uh, theater or arena, whatever your venue is. Well, it feels good to play to your audience, and you know that they're there, and that you're there together, and they're familiar with your catalog, and they know who you are, and they're there because they love
yeah,
you, and that's a good feeling. But then there's an entirely different sort of experience for the band when we go out and we're opening for someone. Something I really like about that, because we're playing to people, they're not there for us. We're playing for someone else's audience. And what I really enjoy about that is that it's a proving ground.
yeah.
Because for the most part, like they're sitting back and going like, I've been waiting for tonight. I've been marking down the days on my calendar. I bought my tickets to this show 3 months ago, and it's finally here. If this band would just get off stage, my band can come on. So there's that aspect, and you know that you're there to work, and you're there to just do what you do.
Mhm.
And whether or not it translates to anyone in the audience, that's not up to you.
Yeah,
But there's something about that tightrope act, that tightrope walk that's appealing to me, because the ego of playing just to your own audience, well, it's fantastic, but then also to get down in onto the front lines like that and get into the trenches and have to really, really earn it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
There's something very attractive about that as well. But the other part of your question, you wanted to know about anecdotes.
Yeah.
There's one thing that stands out for me, and you had brought up Aerosmith, right?
Yeah.
I think sitting backstage with Aerosmith, I think it was the first or second time we had ever played with them. I think it would have been Helsinki, Finland.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we run into Steven Tyler, and I start talking with him, and Steven Tyler has one of the most distinctive voices in rock music.
Yeah.
I know he's a very eccentric character.
Mm-hmm.
And as you read his memoirs, and I know there are certainly some very unsavory things in there for sure. He was a product of his time, along with his appetites, and that's that. But what a voice!
Yeah.
And I got to have this time with Steven, and he shared with me some very complimentary words and some great words of encouragement to me.
Mm-hmm.
And to be told those things by someone like that, they're just things that I'll never forget. That person said those things to me. Mm-hmm. Whoa. That's just, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. So thank you, Stephen.
I once, the first gig I paid money to go and see was Kiss, way many years ago, and their support band was an little unknown band from New Jersey called Bon Jovi. And right. I remember a lot of the audience just wanting them to get off the stage so they could see the Kiss show. But I remember them being really, really good as well that night. I went out and brought their album after the show. Anyway, another question for you. You've cited Joni Mitchell and Van Morrison as a huge influence. I wonder how do they influence your writing specifically?
Vulnerability.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the thing that those two have in common. And I think that's informed the way that I write. Yeah. But it's not just them, Leonard Cohen, and there's so many writers that, it's always about the writers that write with that naked vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Because artistically, you got to work really hard to try to find any modicum of authenticity within yourself. We're playing rock music. Mm-hmm. Well, rock music has, it's a genre that has all but been relegated to novelty nowadays, or to, it's so closely associated with decades that have passed.
Yeah.
When you ask the average person, think rock music, yeah, 70s, 1970s, or long, the long hair, bell bottoms, or chest, or if they want to talk about some of the rock of the 80s. So you have these parameters, for rock music, it's gonna be guitar driven. You're gonna have guitar solos up the ass everywhere. You're gonna have loud drums. You're gonna have somebody singing that's gonna do a lot of screaming.
Yeah.
And a lot of wailing. Well, I think that the idea for me of taking the vulnerability and writing about things that truly are important to me, that resonate with me on a personal level for that reason that I was telling you before. Like each one of these songs, if they have any success at all, that's going to be a mantra for me to repeat every night. And if it's on my tongue, it's going to be on your ears. If it's on your ears, it's going to be on your tongue.
Yeah.
And like the idea of trying to make something of substance, trying to make something that speaks to and from my heart. That's where an artist like Joni Mitchell or Van Morrison, that's where that really comes in for me. And,
Yeah.
you do your best, you know. I'm not the most eloquent person, but I try. I try to do it, and I'll always do my best. I'll always try to get there.
Yeah. What's your favorite Van Morrison album?
Astro Weeks.
Yeah.
Astro Weeks is just the one. It's an outlier. I like all of his records, even the ones I don't like that much, I still like them
Yeah.
because it's just watching the progress of an artist. Um, Even if it's a little bit boring, I still like it because that's a statement from an artist that I believe in. But I would say Astro Weeks. Well,
Moondance?
Moondance is a given. Moondance is like a greatest hits record. It's crazy,
Yeah.
but Hispanic Street Choir, Vidon Fleece is an
Yeah.
overlooked
Yeah.
record. Vidon Fleece is
Do you like his
really great.
later bluesy jazz stuff?
Yeah, and yeah, I like all of that stuff. All of that like really mellow, jazzy stuff. Like, yeah, man.
Have you ever met Van Morrison? Because he's a bit grumpy, apparently.
Yeah, we've shared the bill. I think that for me, I've had the opportunity, having shared the bill, but I don't need to meet him.
Hmm.
I just don't. And
Yeah.
knowing that if he's cantankerous at all, and I know certainly has a reputation for that, like, man, I don't need to interface with that because I've got the person I know what his music has meant in my life. I don't need to go and attach some other thing to it.
Yeah. One last question for you. Which album do you think is culturally more important, Sgt Pepper or Pet Sounds?
Well, you have to look at the time
Yeah.
that each one of those albums was released and what that zeitgeist was. And so that's, there are just going to be two different ways to frame that. You can look at it and say, well, which one is more culturally significant now? Now that, the Beatles, I don't know, there's the Beatles and everybody else when it comes to records. And I mean, I love the Beatles. I'm not like a super Beatles guy, but they're the Beatles.
Yeah.
And Sgt. Pepper is an incredible record. Pet Sounds,
Yeah.
culturally, like Pet Sounds is an amazing record. And I mean, it is a masterstroke.
Yeah.
And so for me to say which one is more culturally significant, well, I think that Sgt. Pepper has sold more and that it's a little bit more etched in stone, on pop culture consciousness. So that would make it more culturally significant right there. But now if we have to go back in time to when each of these records came out, I mean, I don't think that you would have a Sgt. Pepper without a Pet Sounds. So then you go, well, so because they were definitely informed by how far out Brian Wilson had gone with his writing and that production. And
interestingly, Brian Wilson was inspired to up his game after hearing the Beatles' Rubber Soul album.
Right. Yeah.
Then what would the Beatles be if they weren't influenced by Elvis and Little Richard and people like that? It's It's a fascinating genealogy to sort of trace it back, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's a bunch of wild animals drinking from the same pool, you
well,
know.
it's funny, you know, you say that. I mean, like you, I think Sgt. Pepper was more culturally important. It was very influential on the whole album culture that came afterwards. But Pet Sounds is the album that I prefer to listen to these days. It just seems to sit more easily with me as an album. I don't often listen to Sgt. Pepper that much these days, but Pet Sounds, every summer I put that record on.
Well, you take something like Sgt. Pepper, okay?
Hmm.
That album occupies its own. It's so huge that it has. It's like you can't put it next to any other album of that time. Like it's the one. So you can say culturally significant or culturally impactful.
Hmm.
And I think that the marketing, the quality, the mythology of the Beatles, like all of that, it's very different from anything that the Beach Boys were dealing with or that Brian Wilson was dealing with. It was a very, very different thing altogether. The amount of celebrity and the mythology surrounding Brian Wilson is dwarfed by the personalities of the Beatles. You know, you with the Beatles, you had at the fourth, right at the front, the two main people, Lennon and McCartney. These are these are serious characters. You know, these are pop culture icons. Brian Wilson is the mad genius locked in his bedroom,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and he doesn't share the same acumen in the same way that, Paul McCartney, obviously so brilliant,
Hmm.
in his writing style and his talent. But he also doesn't have like, he's not a dick swinger like John Lennon was,
Hmm.
you know, and he didn't have that attitude and everything that made John Lennon part of, along with his talent, but he definitely had that nonconformist, streak that resonated with the time in a really, really big way. Brian Wilson was of a different ilk altogether, and you can't have, you know, you just it's tough to put them next to each other.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think that I don't know that I would choose one I would probably choose Pet Sounds. I would probably, I just know the way that those songs make me feel. But you know as well as I do, every once in a while, you're going to put on Sergeant Pepper and go, just sit back and go, this is such a great record. I can't believe it, but it
And
happens.
a feat of engineering for the time as well. Incredible
The
for the time.
production is devastating on
Yeah,
that album.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, Jay, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I'll repeat what I said at the beginning of this video. Your album Dark Side is released on June the 2nd. I will put a purchasing link just below this video. Um, what time is it where you are at the moment, Jay?
It's 11:47 a.m.
Oh, you've got the rest of the day ahead of you then. You enjoy your day.
Well,
Thank you for
thank you so
your
much, Barry. It's great
time.
talking with you, and hopefully we'll see you when we come over that.
Okay, you certainly will. Thanks a lot. All the best. Bye bye.
All right, take care.